Avowed is a pretty fun game. The combat is responsive and crisp, the world is full of little secrets to explore, and it's bursting with beauty and danger. The story doesn't waste your time, and it doesn't talk down to you. It's all very clear, and it waits for you to follow it without any pressure. But despite those things, Avowed let me down in a lot of ways. I don't hate Avowed. That's a lie that I made up for a more compelling title. But I don't love it, and I do hate that. I don't hate when a game is bad, but I do hate when it has so much potential and it falls short. I could nitpick a lot of small things about this game, and trust me, it has a lot of minor issues, but I'm going to talk about the things that I come to an Obsidian game for, which are quest writing, reactivity, and roleplay. These three things are by no means terrible, but they are underwhelming. And when you try to sink your teeth into this game, they are the unpleasant gristle that makes you reach for a napkin. Number 1. Quest writing. I'm gonna gripe about side quests here for the most part. Side quests are the bulk of this game. There aren't faction quests or any other quest chains. It's all side quest and main quest. Additionally, some side quests tie directly into the ending you get, so there is an argument to be made that the game demands you complete all of its side quests to really experience it. So, in a lot of quests in this game, you are presented with two decisions, with room for interpretation as to which of these decisions is actually the best option. This is a good thing. A lot of my favorite games deal with these morally gray decisions. The issue with Avowed is that you are pushed into these decisions very quickly, and with very little opportunity to discover why these decisions are so messy to begin with. I understand that we need to have a yes or no decision to make a sane video game, but Avowed seems profoundly disinterested in giving you anything to inform you about these decisions. To make matters worse, many quests present you with this yes or no option with no room for a "I'll think on this and decide later." Oftentimes, you'll follow a side quest, and then you end up in a room with a person, and you're quickly given the option, 1, okay, you're a good guy and I'm on your side, or 2, die, and you attack them. These decisions happen, like I said, way too soon, and they give you no opportunity to talk to the person to figure out what decision you should make, or even to understand why those two options are the only ones. What a lot of these quests needed was to take their time to make the player understand what was at stake. Why are we forced to make this hard decision? Why can't a compromise be reached? And why can't I get more information and come back to this? Why am I making this decision for you, and why am I making it right now? If this happened once or twice, I wouldn't be upset. But it happened very, very often to me. Each quest I finished with a bad taste in my mouth. Not because I wasn't sure I made the right decision, but because I felt like I might as well be flipping a coin for all the information I had been given about that decision. Number 2. Reactivity. NPCs don't react to enemies, for the most part. You can't find two factions or creatures fighting almost anywhere in the world, though I did eventually find a couple examples of scripted NPC fights in the third act of this game. The world is very dense. That is part of what makes it so pleasing on the brain to explore. There's always a pack of enemies, or a ruin to explore, or a couple of NPCs chatting to set up a quest. The issue is that these things are all very close together. There were multiple times where I would encounter NPCs having a pleasant picnic together, just a few feet away from a pack of murderous ghosts, or sentient mushrooms, or bandits. Now, when I originally started playing, I assumed this was because they couldn't figure out how to make NPCs fight or react to other NPCs, but I later discovered with those fights I ran into in the third act that they did know how to do this, they just chose not to outside of a few scripted sections. And that really made the world feel kind of static and dead and unreactive, and took me out of the whole experience. Another thing along kind of similar lines is that this game has a stealth system, but it doesn't have a stealing system, or any crime system for that matter. You can take whatever you want, even if it would very clearly be stealing. A very small handful of NPCs will say, "Hey, that's mine," but they don't do anything about it. They don't even really get that angry. You don't get pulled into dialogue. They just give out this half-hearted quip and let you take all their shit. I get that having to add guards and jail and penalties for stealing isn't like a small task for a dev team. I totally get it. But they could have been a lot smarter about how they did this. They could have had more instances of people reacting poorly to your theft instead of just a couple. They could, if they can't have them call guards on you, you are the envoy after all, so maybe they should mention that and be like, hey, that's the envoy, just let him take your shit. You know, something like that. In some cases, you could have people attack you. There were some times when I was in a cave and I was stealing from some rebels or bandits or whatever, and I think that would be a good time to have them say, hey, you took my shit, give it back or I'm going to kill you. But the game never does that. It just lets you walk around and take whatever you want, and it feels kind of outdated, especially for a role-playing game. Also, none of the NPCs move at all. They all stand in one place. It seems like dynamic NPCs of any type were a big no-go in the studio, and I think that informed a lot of the decisions that I've complained about in this section. And all of these things made the world feel very static. I did not feel like I was part of this world. I felt like I lived in an entirely different world from any of the NPCs, and that I was the only one capable of interacting with enemies or really anything at all. Number 3. Role-playing. This is my largest section, and I'm going to break it into 3 subsections, which are premise, backstory, and attributes. And we're going to start with A, premise, which is that you are the Emperor's envoy. Avowed starts with telling you that you are the Imperial envoy. You are an impressive fellow who commands a lot of respect and has a very serious role as a living emissary to one of the most influential people in the world, the Emperor. Starting out, this seems like it's very important. People react strongly to you being this envoy. They bring it up a lot, they reference how important your role is, and all that other good stuff. This was good. This got me thinking, oh hell yeah, I'm not just a scruffy adventurer chosen one, I've got an important tie to society and to this place as a whole. I liked this, and I couldn't wait to see how the story treated this. The story doesn't ignore that you're an envoy. Most of the main story hinges on that, but you are almost instantly rendered inert, free of any real authority. You quickly become a thing that goes places for people instead of someone who tells people what to do. I was very surprised at how few dialogue options there were for, I represent the Emperor, and I am not interested in a fetch quest. Being an envoy quickly becomes irrelevant. Despite the implications of authority, you aren't allowed to attempt to use it for really anything. Maybe this is meant to show you that the Empire doesn't mean anything out here in the wilderness, but unfortunately the game very often refers to its importance. But it never has that importance be relevant in the moment-to-moment story. There's a lot of dissonance. Everywhere you go, especially in the first area, you see the presence of your empire. People you have authority over, and yet you feel like you have no influence with them, not even the opportunity to try to use them or influence them. This is especially egregious in a lot of the side quests, where your role as envoy serves only as a name people call you, while ignoring any of the implications of what being the envoy means. I understand that you need to have, bounty hunting quests or fetch quests in a game like this, but I really felt no incentive as to why the Imperial envoy would be doing this. Besides the metagame need for gear and experience, which is why I ended up doing any of it. I needed gear to go to the next zone, so I might as well do a bounty quest. Why not? But that really made me feel divorced from my character. I was being me, Colin, instead of being my envoy, who has their own needs and their own role in the world. And what really bothers me is that Obsidian actually made a really good game about the implications of being a representative of a powerful nation, and it's called Tyranny, and it's really good. It's a really excellent game. You should check it out. And the fact that they have done it before, and so successfully, really bummed me out. I really think they could have done a lot better job in getting the premise to really click with the gameplay, with the quests. Let's move on to letter B, backstory. So, in character creation, you choose a backstory. There's a handful of them. They cover all the usual bases. You have your war guy, your magic guy, your noble guy, your scout guy. You know the drill. I chose the court augur, which was a sort of future prophesizing mystic, and it sounded the most interesting, so I went with that. Now, to Avowed's credit, my backstory, I ended up being able to invoke it a lot in conversation. It came up way more than I ever thought it would. The issue is that it actually doesn't really do anything most of the time. You maybe get 1 or 2 extra lines of dialogue from the NPC, but very rarely does your background actually change the outcome of anything. It's just kind of a click here for flavor button, which was disappointing. Now, this wouldn't be an issue if there were other options for influencing dialogue, which brings me to letter C, your attributes. Avowed doesn't have a designated social stat. All of your stats contribute to combat and to social situations for the most part. Intelligence can show your knowledge of the world, or general critical thinking. Perception lets you notice hidden things. You can use your might to flex and intimidate people, I guess. You get it. The issue is that these checks also don't really do much. There are a couple moments where they get utilized for meaningful change, but those don't really happen. Most of the time, they just give you a little extra flavor or an extra dialogue line, instead of actually affecting the end result of anything. So, to close out this section, because your premise, your backstory, and your attributes don't really change how you exercise your agency in this world, it makes it feel like who your character is doesn't matter. You can't be the envoy, you can't be a smooth talker, and you can't really be the court augur either, or any other background. You're just a doll that gets to say a couple flavored quips before being funneled to the same end goal. And I get that it's nearly impossible to make a game with definitive control over the narrative, based on your background or your skills or what have you, but at least give me the illusion that the reason I completed a quest is because of my skills, and not because I either chose to concede or attack the person I'm talking to. And I don't think a game needs to have the premise, backstory, and attributes of your character to all matter in order for it to be well written, but one of them needs to feel consistently meaningful, or you begin to feel detached from both your character and the story, and that's how I felt with Avowed. Now, before I get to my conclusion, I want to do a section that I have labeled The Excuse, which is, I understand that all of this happens for a reason. I don't think anyone at Obsidian wanted this game to come out as decently fun, but ultimately underwhelming and uncompelling. I get that there are issues with funding, with development time, the fact that they were acquired by Microsoft not so long ago. There are pressures to make safe games that appeal to wider demographics than other games that Obsidian have made, and you kind of feel that with this game. Unlike a studio like BioWare that has almost none of its original staff from when it made a good game, Obsidian still has a lot of great talent in their studio, so I'm not keen to blame a lack of talent for Avowed's problems. I think it's more likely that there were issues behind the scenes, either development timelines or pressure from higher management that are to blame. But even with that excuse, it doesn't change that the game let me and a lot of other people down. I should wrap this all up, but I have to say, despite my negativity, Avowed is actually a pretty decent game. The combat feels nice, the exploration is satisfying, and the world is lovingly rendered. I don't play most games, let alone beat them, but I did play Avowed, and I played it all the way through. It's a well-made game, and it's easy to pick up and put down. Things happen at a quick pace, and it's easy to play for an hour or two, and, check a couple of quests off. Avowed is a game packed with things to find, things to admire. The score is great, and the graphics are beautiful too. The environment design is masterful, the game always knows how to nudge you into the direction of interesting stuff, or to give you a route to clamber up and explore, and the core story is okay. Maybe a bit lacking in nuance, but there are rare moments when you can really feel the magic come together. In a lot of ways, I feel like Avowed is a successful version of what Dragon Age the Veilguard wanted to be. Not that it sold really well, but that it was a well-crafted but approachable title, continuing a complex and sometimes opaque franchise. It's because of who made this game that I'm being so critical of it. Maybe that's unfair, but it's the sad reality of making great games. You'll always be compared to them. I love Obsidian. Sure, I can point to Fallout New Vegas and say, why not just do that again? But I know it's not that simple. But I also played Tyranny and Pentiment, which are, reasonably recent games. They're great games, and I know Obsidian can make a good story that really feels like you have agency, that makes it feel like you're really role-playing. But for some reason, whenever they make a first-person RPG like Avowed or like previously The Outer Worlds, they forget what RPG stands for. They focus too much on portraying a world rather than letting you really inhabit it, and that honestly breaks my heart. If the action and fighting of this game was amazing, I could forgive and ignore these issues. But unfortunately, that part of the game has a lot of problems too. It's pretty good as far as combat goes, definitely the best that Obsidian has been able to put out, but it's not good enough to compete in the action game space alone. The fact is, if anyone else made this game, I wouldn't have even picked it up. And while I got some brainless entertainment from it, that isn't what I wanted from it in the first place. It's a game that could have been great, with a little more love, time, and thoughtfulness, but unfortunately, as is often the case, we do not live in that world. Avowed is a pretty fun game, but that's the best thing I can say about it, and that is truly disappointing.